In this lesson, we're going to create a few clusters of animated fish that will be used to populate the reef scene. To do this, we're going to use a combination of an emitter, a cloner object, and turbulence object. Once we have the animation set, we will use the Mograph cache tag to cache the animation out and then bring it into the reef scene. So here's where we left off in the previous lesson. Before moving on, I want to show you what I did to our projects folder. So the previous lesson was lesson 8. Moving forward, I'm going to start saving everything into this new folder called final_reef scene. Let's go ahead and click in here. And in here you'll find this current lesson, which is this yellow tank fish file. I copied it into this folder, and the main reason for that is because I want to keep things very tidy and organized. This fish file has a texture associated with it, and that's in this texture folder. So it makes more sense to work in this one single folder rather than copying assets from all these other folders, because we're going to run into some linking issues with textures and I don't want to get messy, so I want to just keep everything tidy in here. So we also have our limbic caches in here that I copied, so everything's working relative to each other in this one single folder. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. So to create our cluster of fish, we're going to use a similar process that we used for the underwater bubbles in a previous lesson. We're going to use an emitter and a cloner object. So let's start off with an emitter. Let's go up to Simulate. Let's go down to Particles and grab an emitter. Let's pull this emitter to the side a bit. Let's also grab a cloner object. We're going to click on this icon here for the cloner object. And let's grab our yellow tank fish limbic file, which is here, and let's put that inside the cloner. We can get rid of the yellow tank fish file that was left behind here from the previous lesson. Now let's select the cloner. Let's go to the Object tab. And under mode, let's change this to object. Here we can grab our emitter and drop it inside the object field. So now we have the emitter, and let's press play, and we're emitting our fish through the cloner. So that's what we have. Let's change the size of the fish, and we know how to do this because we've done this before. We're going to select the cloner, and let's go to our Mograph menu, and let's grab a plane effector. Okay, let's go ahead and go into the parameter tab of the plane effector, turn off position, and let's turn on scale, and let's click on uniform scale and dial the scale down quite a bit here, right around there. Okay, let's press play again, and these are coming out sideways. We can fix that with the plane effector as well. Let's turn on rotation, and let's rotate this 90 degrees for the heading, and now they're going the right direction. Let's play this back again. All right, that's looking good as far as direction, but we need to randomize things a bit. Okay, let's go up here and let's just name this cloner before we forget. Let's call this cloner Fish Cluster A. And with it selected, let's go up to our Mograph menu and let's grab a random effector. So we're going to use this to randomize the scale. Let's go into the parameter tab, and once again, let's deselect position. Let's turn on scale. Let's turn on both uniform scale and absolute scale, and let's dial this down a bit. These are scale in the same direction here. And there's some randomization, so that's looking a little better. But let's go ahead and make this a little more interesting and add some turbulence into this. So let's go up to the Simulate menu, go down to Forces, and grab a turbulence object. And let's press play and see what we get. Okay, we're getting a little bit of movement. So I'm going to stop this. Let's bring the strength up to about 10. And then for the scale, let's bring this up to about 110. The scale is going to give us these larger waves of turbulence. So let's see what we have now. Okay, so we're starting to get some spreading here. That's looking good, but the fish are still kind of looking a bit strange. They're all looking the same direction. None of them are pointing in any other direction but straight. So let's fix that. Select the emitter, and in the particle tab, we have this one parameter called tangential. Let's click that on, and you see right away we have these fish starting to turn in different directions. So let's press play, and that's looking a lot better. Now we're getting some lag, so let's grab the cloner, select the cloner, and under the object tab for the instance mode, let's go from instance to multi-instancing, and it should play back a lot faster. And so getting some really nice motion there. We have too many fish though in the scene, so let's select the emitter and let's adjust some of these parameters. For the birth rate editor and the birth rate renderer, let's drop this to about 3. Let's match them. For the stop emission, we want these to live all the way to 600 frames. So let's type that in. Then for the speed, let's turn this up to about 250 and let's give it a little bit of variation so we have different speed as they're being emitted. So let's see what we have now. So that looks much better now. Okay, so let's introduce some other fish into this cloner setup. In the final reef scene folder, you'll find that we have our extra fish assets Limit cache file. Go ahead and open that up, and let's copy out a few of these fish. Let's grab this red one, which is the Hurricane Rasbora, and then we have the Lujanu Casimira, and then the clownfish. Let's grab those three. Let's copy them, and let's jump back into our yellow tangfish file. Let's paste this into the scene. Okay, and there's our fish. So let's grab them all and put them inside our fish cluster A cloner. Okay, you'll see that they're cloned in, and we have an issue, as far as I can see, with the Rasbora fish file, which is this one. They're pointing the wrong direction. So that, I can say, is an honest mistake that I made. Let's turn off the cloner. And this is actually a good mistake that I made. I'll show you what's going on. So our yellow tang fish file, you can see the z-axis is pointing to the right. And then we have this other yellow one here and the clownfish. They're both pointing the same direction to the right. But this Rasbora fish file, this is pointing the other direction. So this is just a little mess up that I did when I created this, but it's okay because we're going to learn how to fix this. So what we can do is, if we were to turn the cloner back on, let me show you what happens. If we try to rotate this Rasbora fish, let's just do it manually here, you'll see that nothing happens. So an easy fix for this is to group this fish to itself. So let's press Alt-G to group it. Let's just call this Rasbora. Now once this Limit file is grouped with itself, so the parent is a null, we leave that null alone, but now we can select the actual Limit file again, and now we can rotate it, and it'll rotate. Okay, so let's rotate this to 180 degrees. And now let's go ahead and play this through again. And it's looking pretty good. All right, so I think that looks really nice all the way through. I'm just seeing how they're sort of moving through, and they're pretty random looking. You know, something we can do with our Limit file is to select the Limit file, and we can offset the animation a bit so they all have different starting points for their animation. But it doesn't seem like we have to do that, but just know that that option is there. So we can select all of these and just, you know, dial these down a little bit just to give them some variation. Like I said, these are looking pretty good as it is. Pretty randomized, so let's get a better look at these. That's nice. Okay, so what we want to do now is group these together. Let's group the cloner with the emitter together. So select the cloner and then the emitter, and then press Alt-G to group these into a null. Let's call this fish underscore cluster group A. And now let's bring our reef terrain into the scene. That way we have something to reference with, so we can place these fish in the proper spot. So in the final reef scenes folder, we have a file called Reef with underwater bubbles .c4d file, and in here we can just grab the reef terrain. So let's just select that and then copy it, and let's go back to our yellow tang fish file and then just paste it into the scene. So here it is. Now it has a different orientation, so we need to orient our fish cluster group to match the orientation of this reef terrain. So we can just grab the fish cluster group and just rotate it. We'll rotate this 90 degrees. I'm going to do it down here in the coordinate manager. So negative 90 degrees. And let's go ahead and just move it with our move tool out to the left side of this reef terrain here, right in front of it. All right, so let's play this back. And there's our animation. So that's looking pretty good. Now, the scale's a little bit off. I want these fish to be a little bit larger, so just grab the plane effector and scale these up just a little bit more. Alright, so that looks a little better compared to the terrain. Maybe a few clicks more here. Let's try negative 0.72. The scale looks a little better now. Alright, so let's play this through one more time. And I'm happy with it. So now let's create a few more clusters here. So let's just grab our fish cluster group A and control click and drag. And let's just rename this to be group B here at the end. And let's open it up. Let's also rename this cloner to reflect that. We'll change this to fish cluster B. And now let's move this group B out to the back a bit, maybe just to the back and move to the left a little more. Let's also grab the emitter for group B and let's go to the emitter tab. Let's increase the Y size of the emitter just a little bit more. That way we have a little bit more scatter of fish as they're being emitted right along the emitter here. So okay, that looks better. So let me play this again. Let me start that from the beginning. You'll notice that we're getting an identical emission here from this emitter as we do for our group A emitter. So we can change the seed to randomize that emission. So grab group B's emitter, go back to the particle tab, and here under seed, let's change this to 1. So now we should have something that looks a little bit different. Okay, that looks better. Let's drop the amount of fish that are being emitted. So for birth rate editor and birth rate renderer, let's drop this down to 2 apiece. Let's match them. Let's also change the speed just a little bit to make it slightly different. And let's change the variation to be 65. So these on the back will move a little bit faster. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and duplicate our fish cluster group B. Control click and drag that out, and let's call this group C. And we're going to move this one to the right. And we're going to rotate this here in our coordinate manager to be 90 degrees. So it's going to flip it the other direction. And let's bring this to the front of the reef. And right around here, right to the edge. Maybe a little bit lower. So we have a few fish coming from the opposite direction. Let's open up our group C and let's change this cloner to reflect the name of its group. Let's change this from B to C. Let's select the emitter and let's change the seed of this one to be 2 instead of 1 so that we have some further randomization of the emission for this emitter. All right, let's also get rid of one of these fish in here. We don't want the clownfish for this one, just to have something a little different. And let's play this back and make sure that this looks good. Okay, we have this, and it's, yeah, that's looking pretty good. I'm happy with how that looks. All right, there's plenty of fish in there to do what we need. I just want to make sure that none of these are penetrating the reef, so I'm just going to rotate this while this is happening live. So none of these are looking like they're penetrating within the reef, so I think we're good. All right. So now what we can do is we can just cache our cloners out. We're going to do that with a Mograph cache tag. So let's open up all our groups. Let's select all the cloners. So there should be 3. Let's right click and go down to Mograph tags and select the Mograph cache. Let's go into the build tab and let's hit bake. Here it's going to ask if we want to apply this to all the tags and just select yes. That should take a second. I'm going to pause this while it finishes and I'll resume here in a second. So we have our cache now, and if we play this through, we know it's cached because now if I stop this and just scrub through the timeline, I can scrub back and forth and our animation is still intact. So if this wasn't cached, these fish would be flying into the abyss, but everything seems pretty good. So that's awesome. Now what we can do now is we can offset the animation so we have a different initial start for the fish animation. I want fish to be in the scene at frame 0. Right now we have nothing. So with these 3 Mograph cache tags selected, let's go to the playback tab. And in here we have our offset parameter. So we can offset this animation. Let's type in -100 and let's hit yes to apply to all the tags. And now if we just advance 1 frame and let's hit back, we see that at frame 0 we have this now. We have all our fish in our scene now at this initial position. Let's press play and there we go. That's looking pretty awesome. Okay, so now we can just copy this animation. Let's go ahead and collapse all our groups and select our groups A, B, and C fish clusters. We don't have to select any of our effectors or the turbulence object because these aren't doing anything right now. If we turn these off, you'll see that everything still works. So all we need is our fish clusters to copy out. But make sure you keep the emitters with the cloners because although the animation is cached, the emitters are still needed for the cloners to function properly. And make sure that you save this scene file because this is our rig file and we can always tweak things and recache things out if need be. So let's jump into the reef with underwater bubble scene. And let's go ahead and paste our fish into the scene. Let's go into the layers tab and let's turn off everything in here that we don't need to see momentarily. Let's turn off the deformers, expressions, and this animation here as well, so we can get some faster playback. And here's our animation. All right, our cache is retained. Things are looking great. All right, perfect. So from here, I'm just going to save this file out. I'm going to give this a proper name now that we're inside our final reef scenes folder. So let's go up to File, and let's go ahead and press Save Project As. And let's call this Coral Reef Full Scene and save it out. And before we finish the lesson up, let's go ahead and place all these fish clusters into their own layer. So let's middle click, select all of these clusters and go down to Layers and click on New Layer from Object Selection. And let's just call this Fish Clusters. And now let's just save this again and we're ready to move on. In this lesson, we created several clusters of fish using an emitter, cloner object, and Mograph cache tag. In the next lesson, we'll create a school of fish using thinking particles.